Hi everybody, how's everyone doing today? Just want to say thank you for watching. Chris Acebo here, and today I wanted to talk about books, and believe it or not, I wrote a whole few samples here that we can go through. I'll just break it down real quick for you. Some really good books that you're going to love. Here we have Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol. Come on, that's a holiday classic, right? Basically, it's about our lead, Ebenezer Scrooge, who really works very hard, and in doing so, becomes a very successful businessman. Okay, so he's a little grumpy, but you know, hey, he's had a hard day, but then he gets a visit by these three ghosts, and they tell him, maybe you're better off sharing the wealth, like giving it to your co-worker and his poor family. But wait a second, why didn't the poor family just work their tails off the same way Ebenezer did? Then they'd be better off. After all, giving wealth away and stuff like that, that is socialism. So, I don't know, maybe this book isn't so good. We're gonna ban it, alright? Let's get rid of that one. Let's see, here we got Roots by Alex Haley. Basically, it's about the author Alex, who traces his family heritage back to when they were brought to America as slaves. Now, wait a second. This sounds like critical race theory to me, and that's no good, because we don't want white people to feel bad. I mean, you read this book, you're going to probably think that all white people are racist, which they clearly aren't. Okay, slavery was bad, I'll admit it, but that was a long time ago. We need to move forward now and not focus on all that stuff. You know, so we'll get rid of this book, you know. Let's just ban that one too. Let me see, here we go. Animal Farm by George Orwell, you know. This is a really good book here, you know. Basically, it's about, you know, where the animals rebel against the owner, but then, you know, the pigs, which are pretty much the head of the farm, start setting up all these new rules for the fellow animals, saying that everyone should be treated equally. But wait a minute, but then the pigs start taking things upon themselves, slowly modifying the rules in their own favor. You don't want to cast the government in a negative light. After all, this can't be accurate. No. We're going to ban this one too. Let me see. Here we go. The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. This is a classic one. You had a family in Oklahoma, these farmers who were stricken during the Dust Bowl crisis. So they go to California to find work there. But wait a minute, the Dust Bowl? What's so bad about that? Listen, the way Trump said all you have to do to prevent forest fires is rake leaves, well, the same thing applies here. All these farmers had to do is go out and sweep up some of that dust. Just grow their crops and work a little hard, that's all. Next thing you know what? They're going to blame big corporations for giving them a raw deal? I mean, they just need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, okay? These Okies, who do they think they are? We're going to get rid of this book too. I don't want to cast any doubts. Let me see. Here we go. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This is a good book. It's about a future where the firemen don't put out fires, you know, because they make all the buildings fireproof. Why we didn't just do that from the beginning? But they start burning books because they feel the education and all that is, I don't know, somehow tainting society. If we just keep everything a little bit more simple and get rid of these books, after all, that'll make things right. Oh, but wait, the lead character, Montague, who is a fireman, starts to actually read on his own and thinks maybe that's not such a good thing. Clearly, Montague was becoming woke, and we can't have that, so I think Bradbury had the right idea, but the wrong intention. So we're going to get rid of this book too. Here we go. Green Eggs and Ham, a childhood classic of mine by Dr. Seuss. And to think they were trying to cancel out Dr. Seuss. Who do these people think they are? I mean, next thing you know, you're going to start banning books. After all, you know, this is a classic about somebody who's taught to broaden their horizon by trying different things. Specifically, Green Eggs and Ham, which, now that I think about it, sounds absolutely disgusting. I mean, he's basically telling him to put something in his body that he clearly does not want. And after all, we don't know what's in it. I mean, it's not like this meal came with ingredients or something like that. He just said, here, try it, you may like it. After all, it's his body, his choice. So, freedom. We don't want to, you know, take that away from people. So, sorry, as much as we don't want to, you know, cancel out Dr. Seuss, so we're going to have to make an exception here. So we're going to get rid of that book too. I think you start to get the idea, right? Because we've had incidents recently in Florida from Ron DeSantis where some books have been banned. And for reasons I still don't fully grasp, because some of them were math books. One book, I don't think it was just Florida, I think it was somewhere else. There was a book called Mouse, which was a graphic novel based on World War II and some of the incidents that occurred back then. Before I get to that, let me make an interesting point here that our previous president said during one of his silly rallies. He basically said, "I love uneducated voters." Now, this is to the uneducated, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. I'm just asking you to really think about that. What do you think he meant by that when he says he loves uneducated voters? Is he paying you a compliment, thinking that you weren't educated enough, whether it be because the school that you went to didn't have enough budget, it didn't have enough funding to provide a thorough education, or that you simply didn't apply yourself? Whatever the reason may be, in his mind he thinks you're okay because you're uneducated. No, that's not a compliment. In fact, ironically, he's insulting you, but he's saying he appreciates you. Why? Because uneducated voters, in his point of view, are easy to control, easy to manipulate, whereby he can tell them just about anything they want and they'll automatically believe it. You think I'm wrong? That's kind of like me saying to a small group of people saying, "Hey, you know what? You guys don't look all that bright. So here, I have a really idea. You're poor, you're struggling, let's go rob a bank. You guys go out and rob that bank, I'm gonna plan it for you, you put the plan into motion, and then bring me the money, and I'll make sure it's divided out equally. Because you guys aren't smart enough to do the counting on your own. But I think you can handle this task for me." Does it sound like I'm acting in their best interests? No, not at all. Does it sound like I'm complimenting them by saying they're not too bright? No. When somebody says, "I love uneducated voters," he's not complimenting you. He's pretty much saying, "I think you're stupid and you're the type of person I need, again, so I can control and manipulate." And what a better way to uneducate people than by banning books, by banning things in history, by, banning important key things that happened in our past that can teach us about what's going on now. The point I tried to make about Mouse is that I actually took the time to get it from my public library and read it. It's a graphic novel. It's not the most intricate drawn, and it's not very violent looking, even though it describes some violent things that happened during World War II, like the way the Jews were treated and killed. They were depicted as the mice, and the Nazis were depicted as cats. So you kind of see the idea of how that story unfolds. It talks about authoritarianism, it talks about fascism, and those are things that are important to learn, because believe it or not, it's unfolding before us as we speak, both in recent politics and in the current politics. So it's important to understand these things. The same thing about books like the Civil War and some of the things that happened. The Dust Bowl crisis was real, and some of the atrocities this family went to were real. Maybe the Jodes was a fictitious family that I'm not sure about, but that is an actual point in history. The same thing with Roots. We can all say slavery is a bad thing, yeah, but there are actually some people out there. In one recent interview during a Trump rally or a rally of that nature, where one person was asked, do they condemn slavery? Would they still want slavery? And I kid you not, the person actually said, "No comment." No comment. Are you serious? You can't just flat out say slavery is wrong. If you can't say that, there's something wrong with you, and you clearly are uneducated. You haven't really learned, the important things about that time in history. Learning about history and learning about things your ancestors did, like if you were from down in the South, doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a racist, unless you actually are racist, where you do hate people of color. It teaches you some of the mistakes that your ancestors made, and in learning that, hopefully you can improve yourself and future generations moving forward. The same thing about World War II. The same thing, the way Jews were persecuted and all that. With the exception of Mouse, I don't know specifically what books were banned. Like I heard some math books were banned because they supposedly depict racism. I don't even understand how that's even possible. But what I would say to you is, if you live in an area where books are being banned, whether they're books on pride or on history or about slavery and they're being banned for stupid reasons, I would say go to your library and actually rent those books and read them and keep on reading. Encourage your children to read if you have children. If there are certain books from school that are being banned, even if they're aimed more for young adults, they don't want your kids reading them, I would suggest for the parents to go on and read those books and find out why they're being banned. Is it really worth the effort to ban them? Is that the right thing? Because something tells me it's not. And if you realize that this book is actually essential in teaching your children, then have them read it. Have them read it on their own if they're not allowed to read it for school. My advice to people like Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, I would say stop being a moron, stop being a bully, stop trying to push people around and butt heads with the news, and try and be a little bit more compassionate. And above all, broaden our education, broaden people's minds, encourage them to read. One of the other books I was asked to read that I didn't mention was called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder, where the author talks about history and certain aspects of communism, fascism, and what the Nazis did, and how that applies to some of the politics to this day, and it's very relatable. And in that, he lists a bunch of other books. I realize some young readers who I talk to like to read like fantasy novels, sci-fi, and there's nothing wrong with that. I did that too when I was young, but as I got a little older, I tried to read other books of substance. Books by Dickens, by Thomas Harding, by William Shakespeare, and by George Orwell. In addition to Animal Farm, which is also a very good book, which shows some of the flaws in our political system. It also has a book called 1984. I can't go through all the titles, that'll be very influential, but I'll list them in the comment section below. And if, in case anyone's wondering, all these books that I've mentioned, I've read with the exception of two, and that is A Christmas Carol and Roots. And the only reason I haven't read those is Roots I saw on television years ago and both recently, and they also remade it. It's like a two-part miniseries, and they remade it years later. The remake wasn't as good, but the moral message still carried true to this day. And I'm not one who usually likes to read a book after I've seen the movie, based a movie version on it, because it kind of taints the imagination a little bit, because I'm always thinking more about the movie than about the book itself. You know, the same thing with A Christmas Carol. There have been so many movies, animated features, miniseries, theatrical versions of it that, let's face it, every Tom, Dick, and Harry pretty much knows that story. But, you know, if you still feel like reading it, I would definitely recommend that. And, like I said, get out and read books. And if you see books being banned, get out and read those books too, because there's a reason they don't want you reading them. There's a reason they want to de-educate you, de-educate your children. And it's not for your sake, and it's certainly not for the sake of your children and your family. It's so they can better control you. Educate yourself and get a better understanding of what's going on in the political system. And know that when somebody says, I love uneducated voters, that is not a politician you can trust. That is not a politician that is looking out for your best interests. So, I get that you're busy and you may not have time to read. I understand that. I'm in the same boat as well, but a half hour a day or an hour every few days, read a book whenever you get a chance. You can get them for free. You don't have to buy them. I get them from my public library, and if they don't have a certain book I'm looking for, they can get it through other libraries. And I'm sure libraries in other states are the same way. So, and if you have to go out and buy the book, you can get them used on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles very easily. So I encourage you, get out and read. Don't let yourself be de-educated. Don't let yourself, be steered away by politicians who don't have your best interests at heart. Get out and read, please. Anyway, I hope you understand, and thank you for watching.